EPSI presents Knowledge Series.
Five, four, three, two, one.
Good morning. I'm Mahesh Sharma. On behalf of EPSI, I welcome the Pro Chancellor of DMIMS, Professor Mishra, for this EPSI Knowledge Series. Professor Mishra is a seasoned medical educator, having spent more than fourscore decades in this domain, having traveled widely all over the world, and having been part of the policy and academic regimes for umpteen number of times. Professor Mishra probably is one of the most qualified professionals in the country to speak about medical education and the extraordinary times we live in. Welcome to this knowledge series, Professor Mishra. We're very happy to have you with us.
Thank you, Mahesh.
And
Nice of you.
it's a pleasure having you with us, sir. So the first question I wanted to ask you is we are living in an extraordinary time with the pandemic affecting us, and the pandemic has more or less fundamentally altered the way we look at education. And medical education is a very high touch, personalized educational process. Uh, so, how do you see the impact of online, completely, totally online education on the medical domain as an educator?
Mahesh, I totally agree with you. The pandemic has really shaken every walk of life in a very significant and impactful manner. And therefore, to say that the domain of medical education is unaffected by it would be too tall a claim. I have no hesitation in putting across that it has impacted the entire process of medical education in a very significant manner. As you are all aware, that ultimately the modality only left with all of us for pursuing this period was that it was only an online modality that could have been availed. And therefore, in terms of the online modality, various measures, various initiatives have been taken across the medical schools in the country. And as we classically say, that the show must go on. And therefore, the entire process of cognitive domain of medical education, to the extent it is feasible, possible, permissible, and doable on the virtual mode, is on. But as you have rightly and very pertinently raised a million-dollar question, medical education basically is a high-touch education. If you look into the domains, cognitive domain alone cannot sustain to the cause of medical education. It is the domain of skills, the clinical skills, the psychomotor domain, the behavioral, attitudinal, communicative, leadership, professional domain in what we classically describe in the affective or conative domain of the curriculum. All of them mandate that they are required to be dispensed on site, and as you classically designated rightly, high touch method. It is true that there are various modalities where things have been articulated in terms of standardized patient, in terms of simulation modes, in terms of various audio-visual recordings for the purpose of working out. But that cannot meet the requirement which is required to be dispensed for a learner on-site, clinical bed teaching, OPD teaching, and various high-touch methods that are mandated in order to really make the entire curriculum and entire competencies go. More so presently, the Medical Council of India and now the National Medical Commission from the academic year 1920, they have implemented competency-based medical education across the country in all the medical schools in the country. I am happy that I had the fortune to work out that document as chairman of the then Medical Council of India, wherein the entire competencies are clear. It is not just the cognitive competencies which will do. The competencies in terms of the clinical skills, the competencies in terms of the affective domain, they are all integrated into the curriculum, and they will mandate that there is a definite and substantial component of on-touch methods which are mandatory for the purposes of initiation, inculcation, consolidation, and certification of the skill. And therefore, the real issue is that how exactly we are required to be meeting the ends. As of now, the reality is that it is the virtual mode that the entire dispensation is being carried out. But gradually now the campuses are getting opened up and the regular classes, including the on-site mode, by adhering to the various norms which are required in terms of masking, sanitization, social distancing, abiding by that. Now, there is a process which has been on in terms of the campuses getting opened up for the academic session 2021, which is substantially delayed. But yes, the things are on. However,
So,
to construe that, yeah, please.
yeah, specific, from what you've been observing so far, what I could glean is that there is a substantial element of one-to-one personalized education needs mandated in the medical education process. And considering the kind of times we are living in, we are trying to do our best when it comes to online. That is the understanding I get from what your perception and isn't it? If that is the case, does technology at all play a role in moving medical education from one-to-one personalized to technology enabled? Is there a hybrid possible at all?
Yes, I was exactly drawing that point home. There cannot be a substitution of 1:1 method, which is so vital for the purposes of skill orientation. But to say that technology, even on that count, will not play a role is now a far-fetched proposition. The present contingent situation in which all the virtual modes availings have been compulsorily made by all of us, they have really opened several vistas which perhaps they were not there in my mind in the normal times. And therefore, I do advocate that we have come to a situation where the judicious use of technology, the blend of technology in the entire gamut of medical education, as it is classically now should be called as informational technology assisted medical education, rightly you are using in a hybrid form. And I will elaborate further. Let us work out taking these experiences and the use of the virtual modes which have been so extensively used, evolve a model of medical education for long-term basis, which I would like to call as quote high tech and high touch method of medical education. So this is a situation which has really opened eyes of all of us to really incorporate that hybridization, because there is something which can be worked out on the virtual mode very effectively. And there is yet another definitive component which will be mandating the on-touch method, on-site method. But to say that hybridization is not called for will be absolutely something which will be denying the reality. And therefore, times have definitely taught us that we need to seriously plan out the medical education in terms of a hybridized model, which will be incorporating the online and offline modalities. Structuring, of course, will take some time and diligent incorporation of plan. But I would definitely like to make things work on what I classically have thought as high tech, high touch mode of medical education.
That's very interesting, sir. Sir, and it also, in my mind, opens up another line of inquiry that in our country, especially, the number of seats available in the medical education is minimal, about 55,000 seats in all every year. And one major impediment to that expansion is the high cost of setting up and maintaining a medical college. Would a high-tech, high-touch model which you are envisaging, would that play a dent on that in terms of expanding the number of opportunities available for medical education, or would that be expecting too much?
I mean, this is exactly what I'm wanting to focus on. We definitely need greater number of avenues in medical education, although today we can claim that we are the largest producers of trained manpower in the world, because with 600 medical colleges under our belt is no mean an achievement. But then if you really take into consideration the requirement of us commensurate with the WHO ratio, we are still lagging behind. Knowledge Commission report had clearly spelled out as to what is the deficiency of the manpower in terms of the 2011 census, and now we are in the year 2020, and therefore that gap has again, that has to be narrowed down. Technology, online mode, judicious blend of technology definitely will affect the entire cost of setting up of a medical school. Because right now, whatever minimum standard requirements we are contemplating, and I can put it across to you, 1997 graduate medical regulation, which is in vogue, is my authorship. Postgraduate regulation of 2000 is my authorship. So therefore, I have been associated with this entire structuring process for almost 3 decades as a part of the Medical Council of India. But frankly speaking, that was in a traditional mode. Now, when we are incorporating that there is a very huge place for technology assisted medical education, there has to be a rechurning and a reapplication of mind in regard to what would be now the nature of medical education in the hybridized mode, commensurate with that, what will be the standard requirement. I will give a simple example. The mode of library in a traditional mode that we conceive is a huge space occupying mechanism. But if I'm taking into consideration now the entire concept of digitalized library, I mean, the entire dimension changes, the entire orientation changes. And therefore, these are the various things which have to be taken into consideration for the purpose of working out a policy frame on medical education, including minimum standard requirements there too, in the context of absolutely judicious, warranted and mandated use of technology, which has been the present experience in last 10 months.
Interesting. On that note, I want to take you to a different but crucial aspect of medical education, which is the admission process. And we have seen it's also one of the most litigated domains in the medical education. And now for the last 3 years, we have seen NEET as a centralized process of admission. And there is still a very, very, very definitive pushback from states like Tamil Nadu, who desperately want to go back to higher secondary marks based admission rather than a centralized NEET based admission. What has been your experience, sir?
See, look, as a matter of fact, as I put it across to you, NEET is basically something which has to be viewed in the context of India pattern. 1995 Supreme Court opened the doors for NEET, and that was basically in the context of the fact that imagine multiple deemed universities, multiple universities conducting their own tests in the name of NEET, in the name of entrance test, was something which was absolutely a huge burden on a learner. Because, see, there are only two modes which are possible. Either you are taking the qualifying examination as a criteria across the country for admissions, so that there is no exception, or multiple entrance examinations cannot be the answer. Because if the examinations are required to be in an entrance mode conducted by the multiple agencies, then the duration and the period in which the examinations are conducted by and large is the same period. And therefore, a learner being open and available to all these tests, including the incurring of the cost that he or she is required to be bearing, was something which was absolutely unimaginable. And therefore, let me put across to you, it was under my chairmanship a committee was constituted, which gave the entire structuring and recommendation of the NEET, which came into operation as a centralized examination mode. It is true that states had certain reservations on that, and which were taken diligently note of, and including the basis, the rationale, the advocacy which has been made across. And frankly speaking, even constitutional mandate has to be viewed in the context of federalism, where medical education is in concurrent list, but health is even today under the constitution a state subject. Therefore, to say that state has no role to play in this entire mechanism, it will be belittling the entire core concept of federalism. But yes, having said so, if we want a unified system, then it has to be centralized in character. State counseling will have its own role. State admissions will be worked out in terms of the proportion which will be worked out. But then the process has to be common so that we are able to unify it in a centralized mode, whereby that particular thing will be facilitating in terms of the participation of the learner. Today, a single NEET is on a common date where the regulatory frame and the dates are made known, including we have been in a position to regulate by regulation prescribe the date of conduct of need, the date of declaration of the result, the periodicity of counseling, including the commencement of the academic year. All this was possible only because benchmarks which were governing the admission, they were worked up. Another controversy in terms of percentage and percentile is always plaguing. But these are the matters which have been dealt with appropriately and answered. I am absolutely an advocate of that this country, in terms of its hugeness, vastness, and such huge variations, admissions to 600 medical schools virtually for now 75,000 undergraduate seats, it has to be centralized. It has to be under a pool. It has to be through a centralized admission. It has to be through a common entrance test, whereby a single inter se merit becomes the yardstick for admissions. There are many other things which will be required to be improvising in that particular system. That is a separate part of it. But I think the wheel of centralized admissions has gone very far. Let us not try to ensure that again it is required to be rolling back to status quo ante. Perhaps that may not, that would be in my opinion, that would be too huge a reversal, which is not desirable and which is perhaps not even needed at this juncture of time. We need to now move forward rather than entering into these small little controversies here and there. The wheel has to be carried forward is something which I advocate very strongly.
And possibly with the Supreme Court deciding last year on the minority question, now the wheel possibly also cannot be rolled back, isn't it?
See,
Because the last challenge,
I always say, ultimately, the judgments of the pronouncements, they are holding the ground only till such time the required legislation is not put into place.
that's true. Yes.
Article 141, 142 of the Constitution is very loud and clear.
Yeah.
You can replace the Supreme Court judgment in any manner that you wish only by an appropriate legislation, which also would be open to scrutiny by the Honorable Supreme Court in terms of its original jurisdiction. So therefore, I always say, I mean, these are the nitty-gritties of it. But let us settle with the position that having walked a distance of nearly 25 years in a particular system, now we wanting to get back to a system which was prior to 25 years with its own rigmarole, and then having a hassles of restoring back to that particular status quo ante. Instead of that, I think having walked a distance of 2.5 decades, now we need to continue with the same, aiming at improvisation of the system in operation. Like even today, it is a blind MCQ which is turning out to be the avenues for admission. But has it not resulted in virtually the qualifying examination being inundated totally? There are implications of it. Therefore, the inter se merit of the common entrance test, the aptitudinal test to be incorporated therein, there are various factors which can be incorporated in streamlining the admission procedure by really incorporating that which is necessary rather than now agitating on whether it will be qualifying examination or the entrance. I advocate the common entrance test as a valid, rationalistic and a reasonable modality for the unification of the admission process with country as one unit without marginalizing and prejudicing the interest of states in any manner, honoring the concept of federalism and thereby respecting the concurrent list is the only answer.
That's a good one. On that note, sir, this is another issue which plagues most professional education. World over, when it comes to admittance into a profession, the candidate is tested either at the entry or at the exit. Let's say you take the US example. To be a practicing lawyer or a practicing medical professional, I need to clear that entrance examination organized by the professional council. In India, we have examinations at all the 3 stages. There is an entrance test, there is a process examination which the candidate undergoes when he undergoes the course, and then there is an MCA mandated exit test. Isn't it time we look at one, like what the government is now proposing in terms of separating education from the profession? Is that the direction we must move?
See, look, again, I mean, no direction can be said to be absolutely free and immune from implications. One good move is that when you are contemplating licentiate examination, as it is now called as, if you look the provisions of the National Medical Commission Act, especially I will be drawing the attention of all concerned to section 15 incorporated therein, where it clearly provides that within 3 years there will be a next examination, or that will be a licentiate examination which will be put into place, which is absolutely, which will be akin to the final MBBS examination, but it will not be in the lieu of final MBBS exam. Please try to understand the system that we have put into place. Degrees are not conferred by the licentiate examination conducting agencies. Degrees are conferred by the universities, because that is the right vested with the university under primarily the 1916 Act of Indian Medical Degrees Act and now 1956 Act of the University Grants Commission. So degrees can be conferred only by the universities, in whether they are central university or the state university or the DMD university, within the provisions of the governing provisions of Section 3 of the UGC Act. So university degree conferring examinations have to be conducted by the university. When you are talking of the undergraduate course, there is an entrance examination for the undergraduate course. There is a degree certifying examination conducted by the examining university. And now what is being proposed is that the licentiate examination and the postgraduate NEET, it will be one and the same examination. So here is a bridging which is taking place. For postgraduate examination, there will not be any separate entrance examination. What is licentiate examination conducted by a designated agency will be also the NEET, means it will serve two purposes. If a stipulated percentage gained, you are entitled for license, and then based on the merit of that very examination, postgraduate admissions will be made for those who qualify for the same. They have also done away with one more examination. Foreign medical graduates of Indian origin, once they used to get their degree, if they are wanting to come back to India, they had to appear for what was called as a screening test, which even today is held. This was in terms of an amendment to the Indian Medical Council Act in the year 2003, where Section 13 was amended. Clearing that screening test, the child was entitled to be registering, getting the provisional registration and do his or her internship. And on satisfactory completion of the internship in a recognized medical school, he or she used to be eligible for the purposes of registration as a registered medical practitioner, and then was required to be eligible to be appearing for the NEET. But now everybody has to appear for the licentiate examination before being entitled to practice. Your degree examination will not be enough for you to be entitled to practice and get registered with the State Medical Council. There will be a licentiate examination, but this licentiate examination itself will be the entrance examination for the purposes of PG courses. Therefore, Section 15 subclause 1 read with subclause 4 there to clarify this, and this has to be put into place within 3 years from the date of National Medical Commission coming into force. So 1920 it has come into force. Maybe by beyond 2023 we will be saying organizing of next, and what you and me were hitherto speculating, perhaps Section 15 is an answer to that.
And once that happens, will that also logically lead to the approving powers of medical education going out of the professional council, like what has happened in the pharmacy and architecture?
I tell you, the whole well, I would like to draw your attention to the National Education Policy document of the Government of India 2020. They are talking of a unified regulatory frame for higher education, but National Medical Commission Act, which is now put into place in place of the Medical Council of India, it has been categorically stated that medical education will be under the jurisdiction of National Medical Commission, and such similar commissions which will be there for the various health professions, they will be respectively under those jurisdictions. Therefore, to say that the overarching or the integrated or the unified body which is going to be created for higher education will subsume medical education or health professional education, to my understanding, is not correct. The protection and the insulation which has been granted to the NMC Act of 2019 under the National Education Policy document of 2020 makes it loud and clear that maybe tomorrow if they are wanting to amend the NMC Act, I really do not know. But as National Medical Commission Act 2019 stands, and in terms of the explicit provisions which are incorporated in the National Education Policy document, the medical education will continue to be governed by National Medical Commission, and National Medical Commission is vested with the authority and jurisdiction of 4 autonomous boards. Number 1, undergraduate medical education, undergraduate board; postgraduate medical education, postgraduate board; accreditation of medical education, accreditation and rating board; registration and equivalence board for the maintenance of the Indian medical. So 4 jurisdictions which were originally there with the Medical Council of India, under the NMC Act, the said jurisdictions continue to be with the National Medical Commission. And if National Medical Commission is protected by the National Education Policy, then I do not visualize this differentiation that is being speculated to be permissible within the present provisions of National Medical Commission Act 2019. And that is the position, because I have critically looked into all the provisions of the previous act, present act, and all 66 pages document of the National Education Policy, word by word, line by line, aligning it with both letter and spirit of it. This is the conclusion, as the student of these 2 documents, I am in a position to draw.
Professor Mishra, I can't resist my journalistic tendencies here. NEP has no legal standing in that sense. NEP is a policy document. It only speaks about the intent of the state. The intent of the state gets converted into an act only when an act is passed. I want to pick your brains on that once again, because this is crucial for medical education, that when the Higher Education Act, whenever it happens, the Higher Education Regulatory Act gets passed, if in case it becomes the overarching authority, then it would stand to reason that it will then may not discriminate between one stream of education vis-a-vis the other. Whether it should or should not is a different question. But if that stands to reason, then the current reading, as you rightly said, that if NMC Act is amended, might change. But what I'm interested is in knowing your opinion. As a seasoned educator, is that the right move? Should Medical Council or its new avatar, the National Medical Commission, should it not have a role in the establishment of medical colleges, in the approving of medical colleges?
The question is, we need to keep one thing very clearly in mind. If you are vesting the role and responsibility of maintenance of a register of registered medical practitioners with a regulatory body, then what is the role and responsibility of the state medical councils in respective states? We forget one thing. We do not keep in the back of our mind that we are required to be legislating in a country which has accepted the concept of federalism within the constitution itself. Health is a state subject, and that is the reason why registered medical practitioners registry is maintained by a state medical council. And state medical council has no role to play with the medical schools in the respective states. See, we are not appreciating the scheme of the constitution, and perhaps we are wanting to be interpolating on the merit or demerit of it. What you are contemplating is already in vogue. There is, every state and union territory has a state medical council or union territory medical council. And in case they are not, within 3 years from the launch of the National Medical Commission Act, every state and union territory will have a state medical council. What is the role and responsibility of a state medical council? To maintain the state medical register of the registered medical practitioners in that state. And does that state medical council have any jurisdiction in regard to standard of medical education and regulation of medical colleges? No. So the segregation which you are contemplating at the apical level is there at the state level. Medical Council of India or National Medical Commission do not create a registration on its own. The registration which is created in the name of the Indian Medical Register is The feedings which are coming from the state medical registers and the compilation of the all state medical registers is the Indian medical register. And now we are on making it online, we have converted into a live online register. But there is nothing. The custodian of the State Medical Council even today is the registrar of the State Medical Council. And mind well, the secretary of the Medical Council of India or the National Medical Commission is not called as registrar of the Medical Council of India or National Medical Commission. See, there are several bottlenecks in it. Therefore, to say, whenever you are talking of the apical regulation of medical education in this country, then in that situation, standards of medical education must be vested with the regulatory body for the purposes of uniformity, and regulation in regard to the state medical register. Health being a state subject, it will be within the domain of the state. Education, medical education being a concurrently subject, it will be centralized with the regulatory apical council. However, for the purposes of integration of the state medical councils for the country, there will be an authority required to be vested with the apical regulatory body for maintenance of what is called as a notion. Having said so, you cannot leave the ethical conduct regulations to various states to formulate on their own. There has to be a uniformity, because what is ethical breach in Jammu Kashmir should be an ethical breach in Kanyakumari. That you can't vest in state. Therefore, the prescription of regulating the ethical code of conduct is vested with the apical councils, which is to be executed through the state medical council. So there is an intricate balance between the state and center, which has been worked out in this particular domain. And therefore, before we jump to any conclusion, this structure which is worked out and the dichotomy or the conscious reason, why is it that medical education is in the concurrent list, and why is it that health is a state subject? If this logic is deciphered, I think we are able to get this answer automatically within the scheme of federalism contemplated in the constitution, and subjects allocated to the state and central list, including the concurrent list respectively.
Thank you so much. Because that issue about balancing the state and the center, the profession and the education, has actually created havoc in the technical education domain, especially with the AICT and the professional councils at loggerheads. So I'm hoping that the NEP, when it gets actualized into a series of acts, this dichotomy and balance should be understood by the policymakers. That
they should. Intricate balance is very necessary, and putting them into multiple roles. Let us learn by the experience of AICT versus Pharmacy Council of India.
Yes,
I think the real issue lies there. And now, rightly so, the decision has been back that pharmaceutical colleges have been put back to the Pharmacy Council of India. They will be the registering authority, and they will be the regulating authority for regulation. Multiplicity of regulators will always result in divergences.
True.
Too many cooks will always spoil the broth. And therefore, it is imperative that whatever, good or bad, it should be under a common unified umbrella. So therefore, even if it will not be in a position to save you from the rainy season, at least it will save you from the heat.
That's a good analogy. That brings me to my last question, Professor Mishra. About a week or a month back, the government has proposed an integrated system of medicine, which looks at possibly at some future date integrating. I can't quite fathom how they would do that. Different streams of medicine: allopathy, homeopathy, Ayurveda, Unani. As an educator, where do you stand on this? How do you see it?
Look, I have very strong opinions on section 20.5 or para 20.5 of the National Education Policy document, which is basically talking, and the seeds of this, I'm sorry to say, they were already sown in the National Medical Commission Act. If you see section 50 and 51 of the NMC Act, it is stipulated there that the three chairmen of the Central Council for Homeopathy, National Medical Commission, and Central Council for Indian Medicine every year will be having a joint meeting, and that meeting cannot be a part of a coffee club. What that joint meeting would be and what was shown in these provisions of section 50 and 51 in the NMC Act now gets vividly depicted in what is the aim in para 20.5 of the National Education Policy document. But let me put it across. The advocacy of this integration of systems at the undergraduate level in the mode and manner which it is described, unfortunately, in those that one para, I am sorry to say, this will ruin the modern medicine. Number one. Number two, it will be generating a mixopathy. I classically call this as a mixopathy. You please read the Government of India's document when they wanted to create Ayush. The principles which were there for the Ayush development. And now you see the principle which is being advocated in the name of integration of the various health sciences. See, today, modern medicine is something which is not an import of the Indian system. It has been defined. Look into the 1916 definition, the first act which was propounded in this country, 1916 Indian Medical Degrees Act. It was not modern medicine, it was Western medicine. Western medicine in terms of 1956 of MCI has been defined as modern medicine. Look into the definition of the word modern medicine in the NMC Act. It is same as it was in 1956 Act, and the same except by changing the name of Western medicine, which is now designated as modern medicine, the definition remains the same. My basic question is, the advocacy which has been put across, read the National Education Policy document. They say that basically because if you look into the preferences of the people of this country in regard to the healthcare options, they are mixed in character. Where exactly this conclusion is drawn, in all humility, let me put it across. The last document which I have been able to say on NSSO is 2014 document. After that, public domain, there is no such document. What does it say? It clearly says that of the OPD care facilities which people have availed in this country, 2014 census, more than 97% of the people in terms of the OPD care have availed modern medicine, inter alia, allopathy as their option. IPD care, it is 94.8%. Roughly, you can take it 94 to 95% for IPD care and 96 to 97% for OPD care. Now, if this is the situation, to say that because people are opting for mixed health care and therefore integration of the pathy is going to be required, I think the world is going a different way. In whatever way and whatever name, if this is being conceived, I'm sorry, let the action plan document be made loud and clear. Perhaps we'll be able to understand greater the intricacies and the operations of it. But unfortunately, in the 66-page document, professional education has been dismissed in 2 paragraphs. Medical education and health professional education only in bare 2. 9 lines have taken the entire spirit or soul, whatever you may call. Para 20.2 and para 20.5 is the only operational document which I am able to read. But believe me, modern medicine which has created the image of this country worldwide, modern medicine which has taken the wheel of this country in terms of recognition, healthcare, and all the aspects in various manifestations, let it not be losing its identity in the mode and manner this mixopathy will be leading to. It will be disastrous for Indian system of medicine, and it will be equally disastrous for the modern medicine. This integration is a khichdi. Khichdi is a good food only for the sick. It cannot be a good food for the healthy people. And therefore, independent of, I'm still, this observation can be taken as immature. But let me be very emphatically loud and clear that the initiative which is getting depicted in that particular para 20.5, at least to a person who has catered his life to the cause of medical education for 4 decades, it is harming the interest of medical education. It is harming and prejudicial to the interest of medical profession. And it is definitely harming to the image of this country and the professionals who have contributed to the cause of this country's image worldwide. That will get a dent, and that is exactly my worry. Therefore, I strongly have a very strong opinion in regard to mixopathy mooted by the National Education Policy document in para 20.5 incorporated therein.
So no mixopathy at any cost is your final take.
Therefore, I'm saying, I mean, maybe my opinion, you can always accuse me of bias, because I have been a learner of modern medicine. I have been a teacher of modern medicine. I have lived my life in modern medicine. But I always say, let us not mix things to be diluting both. If the mixture is resulting in dilution, then it is not a desirable mixture.
Sure.
In whatever brand and whatever name you may give it, fact of the story results. If mixture is going to result in win-win situation for both, it is desirable. But if it is in absolute lose-lose situation for both, it is a disastrous mixture.
Let's hope the mixture turns out better.
Hope so. Hope so.
It's a pleasure talking to you, Professor Mishra. Thank you so much for talking to us.
So nice of you. So nice talking to you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.